Common Sense News Time, coming up on 7:41. With us right now on the line live is our new Virginia Senator Tim Kaine. Senator Kaine, great to have you with us today.
Hey, John, good to be with you, and congratulations on the Western Virginia expansion. I seem to be with you on days when you're moving into new real estate, and so congratulations on that.
Well, you know, Senator, they say timing is everything.
Well, it's always a good time for more common sense, and I'm learning that. It underlines an exclamation point now that I'm up in the Senate.
Well, you've had a whirlwind 2 weeks. Your committee assignments are fabulous, and you're involved in everything. I was saying that earlier in the week in one of the columns I did. We got a couple minutes of time. I want to get right to the meat. My first question is, now that you're there in the Senate, are you going to pass a budget?
John, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure we do, and I have been agitating about that since the day I got in. I think the critique of the Senate as a place where the Budget Committee was not producing a budget has been a fair critique. So I didn't ask to be on the Budget Committee, but I got put on, and once I was on, I started to say, we got to pass a budget, and I was very happy that last week the committee's new chair, Patty Murray, is the new chair of the committee, and other Senate Democratic leadership said we are going to pass a budget this year. So I am all, full speed ahead on it. There's a couple of other new committee members on the Budget Committee. Angus King, who was a governor before he was in the Senate, and people who've been governors or mayors or who run businesses, we're real used to this. You're not going to solve our challenges by just poking fun at the other guy's budget. So we got to pass one too. And then, as you know, the House will pass a different budget. Then we'll put them in conference, and the American people can see what the two budgets look like, and then hopefully we'll talk it through and find some compromises.
I think that's the key issue, is being able for the Senate to put something on the table, so then you can go into reconciliation. People can see what actually the two are, and then hopefully we can get that worked out. Now, earlier in the week, last week, Congress says part of what they did, the House passed the No Budget, No Pay Act. So essentially, conceptually, if that went down and you didn't pass a budget, your income would be put in escrow. You wouldn't get a paycheck. How do you feel about that conceptually?
Well, I think it's, and the way it's set up, which I think is fair, is that the trigger is each side passing its own budget. It doesn't let the other side hold you hostage and hold your pay hostage. But according to the Budget Act of 1974, the House has got to pass their budget, the Senate's got to pass their budget. I have no problem with that. I feel like it is so important that we get this right. And again, the only way we'll do it is not by letting a House pass a budget and then shooting it full of holes. It's the House has their version on the table, the Senate's got our version on the table, and then we find a path to common ground.
Senator Kaine, over the weekend, one of the Sunday talk shows, the former VP candidate, Paul Ryan, also in the House, Republican from Wisconsin, made the comments that he thought there was no way to avoid sequestration as we go forward. Now, everybody knows, obviously, that's going to wreak havoc in the state of Virginia economically. We take Paul Ryan pretty seriously when he says we can't find our way out of this. Are there any options now?
Well, what Congressman Ryan said, I had my first delegation lunch last week, John, where the Virginia delegation, House and Senate, gets together once a month. And the House members, Democratic and Republican in Virginia, were sort of saying the same thing. They were saying that they hoped it wasn't the case, but basically their concern was they don't see the leadership talking right now. And it's going to take a lot of talk to try to find, a way to avoid the sequester.
Right.
So that's why I am so anxious to get about this Budget Committee work, because I think while the budgets are supposed to be done by mid-April and the sequester kicks in early March, if we start to make some progress toward a budget, we might be able to find a way to delay the sequester if there's good faith effort going on this budget front. Right now, the thing that's a little bit weird is we have a March 1st essentially sequester. We got a late March, the continuing resolution that funds government runs out, and now we have a debt ceiling limitation in mid-May and a budget deadline for each house to pass budgets by mid-April. So we have 4 different sort of budget deadlines. I'd like to see if there might be a way to sort of align them all and let them all be driven by the schedule around each house trying to get a budget, because that really, we shouldn't be making sequester or other decisions as one-offs. We should be doing them in tandem with an orderly budget process. And it looks like we'll have an orderly budget process this year for the first time in a while. Maybe there's a way we can align some of these dates.
So that makes a lot of sense, Senator. So what you're saying is that if you can work with your colleagues in getting the budget process aligned, then that would be the way to, I guess, sidestep or retool the automatic sequestration.
That is a concept I've floated. So the idea is instead of 4 kind of like little mini crises, March 1 sequester, end of March continuing resolution runs out, April 15th, both sides supposed to have a budget, mid-May, that ceiling limitation deadline. Well, why don't we just let it all pivot off the orderly budget process that now both sides have agreed we're going to be engaged in? I happen to believe that on the budget process, we need to find about another $1.5 trillion over 10 years of deficit reduction. Now, I would take the position that you find that deficit reduction with a mixture of revenues and spending cuts. Others might have different points of view, but let's let the budget process drive the these decisions rather than having a series of just sort of one-off little mini crises. The budget process gives you that ability to do the long-term look and put the long-term plan on the table. So that's something that I'm floating, but we'll see whether there might be a way to better align all these dates, because we're only talking about a matter of weeks between them.
Yes.
If we can get them all kind of in a similar schedule, I think that would promote better decision making.
Senator, is it fair to say that you're committed to finding a way to decrease the annual deficits that this nation is continuing to ring up?
I think it's very important. I think, there's different ways to look at it, John. I tend to look at, how do we bring the total public debt per GDP as a percentage of GDP, how do we bring that down? We're now, in the over 100s. The tradition would be to have it down in about the 70s. And we need to bring, total public debt as a percentage of GDP down. And I think that that's very important. Others look at different measures. That's a measure that I think is important. And there's a lot of economic literature that says that's what you really have to, to target. So I do think that that's critical. It's critical for the Budget Committee, but we've got to do it in a way that doesn't screw up our ability to continue to expand the economy. You see in some European economies, they've done austerity in a way that's driven the unemployment rate up to 25%. In Spain, our unemployment rates are still too high, so we have to figure out ways, if we're going to bring debt to GDP down, that we can do it in a way that doesn't push us into higher unemployment.
Women in combat. You immediately made a statement when the decision was made by Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta that, in your judgment, this was a good move. Why?
Yes, I do. I think the rules ought to be, different combat positions have, significant requirements, including physical requirements that you and I both know. A whole lot of men don't meet the physical requirements, but we ought to have rigorous physical requirements for all military, especially for combat positions. But if a man or woman meets those requirements, then there shouldn't be a difference in terms of their ability to serve. As you know, women are already serving and being wounded and being killed in combat.
Right.
In combat positions. The fact that we say we don't have women in combat is not factually accurate. Women have lost their lives, women have been injured, and I think it's good to acknowledge that reality. By acknowledging it, we honor the sacrifices of those who sacrificed. But, I think that the key going forward should be have rigorous requirements for combat positions. But if a man or woman can meet those rigorous requirements, then they shouldn't be treated differently.
Senator Kaine, last night about midnight, there were 8 senators, bipartisan, 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, that have put together a new immigration reform compromise. Have you had a chance to digest any of that?
I've had a chance to look at sort of the top line descriptions, John. It's a combination of enhanced border security, some consequence, obviously, for those who are here illegally, but also an ability for them over time to regularize their immigration status. I think it's a very hopeful sign. I love the fact that it's a completely bipartisan group, and I am talking with other senators who are not part of the gang, but other senators, Republican senators, to see about, hey, could we join in and support this? I think it is really important to get immigration reform right, but additionally, when you see something like this happen where there's a truly bipartisan effort, it's good for the institution. We have to show the American public that even if we don't agree on everything, there are things we can agree on. And so the notion of an immigration reform bill moving in the Senate in a truly bipartisan way, I think is a good thing, because we need to find reform, but we also need to show the American public that there are areas where we can find common ground.
Earlier in the week, Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein kind of outlined or introduced a pretty comprehensive set of legislation on restricting firearms.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you come down on Senator Feinstein's bill?
John, you and I talked about this a little bit, maybe about 2 weeks back, and what I said is I could certainly see supporting a limitation on combat-style assault weapons. I am open to that. I think it would be consistent with the Second Amendment. But I think it's really important on this one to get the definitions right. At the end of last week, at least five bills got filed on the Senate side. Senator Feinstein dealing with assault weapons, a bill that is Kirsten Gillibrand and Mark Kirk dealing with federal gun trafficking, a couple of bills dealing with high-capacity magazines, Senator Schumer and others on background record checks. My office is looking at all of the bills, and we're seeking input on the bills to see, are they drawn up the right way? What do folks think? But to skip over some of the bill language and just go to the heart of it, I am very strongly in support of universal background record checks. And I was shopping on Saturday morning and ran into a guy in my neighborhood grocery store who walked up to me and he looked at me and said, "Now, where are you on guns, Kaine?" And I could tell where he was on guns by the way he asked me the question. But we started talking, and he is a very active hunter. And when we got into it, I mean, he immediately said on the background record check, we got to do that. So I very strongly support expanded and universal background record checks. And when you get to the magazine issues and the assault weapons ban, I can support them if I believe that the definitions are drawn up the right way. And we're currently digging into the bill language that got filed right at the end of the week to see how comfortable we feel with it.
Senator Kaine, I have two questions for you. In regards to gun safety, would you be in favor of developing a nationwide database of those who have been correctly diagnosed with mental health problems in order to keep them from purchasing firearms?
The answer is yes, and let me broaden it. We ought to have a national database that includes the records of anyone who is legally barred from owning weapons. So that would be if you're adjudicated mentally ill and dangerous, you're barred from having a weapon. If you're a fugitive from justice, barred from having a weapon. Convicted felon, barred from having a weapon. Domestic abuser under a protective order, barred from having a weapon. We ought to be putting all of that information, once there have been adjudications, into national databases so that people will not be able to purchase weapons if they're already legally barred from having them. So, yeah, we definitely need to do that.
All right, and I want to step back one step. I didn't have a chance to get this in when you and John were speaking of immigration. Would you be in favor of repealing the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment, better known as the Anchor Baby Clause?
No, I wouldn't. The 14th Amendment Citizenship Clause, as you know, was added after the Civil War, and frankly, it was added to overturn the Dred Scott decision. That decision, probably one of the most infamous in Supreme Court history, said that an African American could not be a citizen, even a free African American could not be a citizen. And the court was able to make that ruling because the Constitution had no definition of citizenship in it when it was originally drafted. So the 14th Amendment, for the first time, put into the Constitution the definition of citizen, and I do not think we should be changing that definition.
Certainly. It was written to protect the children of slaves, as well as later on a passage that actually helps to define those children who are born from foreign service diplomats and so forth.
Yes.
So yes. Would you be in favor of any modification of that to keep people from coming into the country in order to have children to be able to take advantage of our hospitalization and health care, by example?
I know that that's a concern, but I think making that is such an important part of the Constitution. And, the Supreme Court decided in about 1890 that a child of somebody who was here from a foreign country, even a non-diplomat born in this country, is actually a United States citizen. And I do not think we should change that constitutional provision. I think we should do other things, and I'm interested in this immigration reform bill that's now kicking in the Senate. Other things to more dramatically secure our borders, to stop, or slow down the flow of illegal immigration. But I do not think we should change the definition of citizenship.
Senator Kaine, we got 15 seconds. I got to ask you the big question. You're going to have to answer it fast. San Francisco is 3.5 over the Ravens in the Super Bowl. Who do you like?
I'm a Ravens fan. I like Flacco because he's kind of like a lunch pail quarterback, and I like the fact that they're near and we can see him. I love Kaepernick. I think he's a great story.
Senator, we're out of time. Senator Tim Kaine says Ravens plus 3.5. Thank you, sir.
Okay, guys, see you.